This is a Token CEO podcast. It is Tuesday, June 29th. This is episode 166, and we are presented, as always, by Sports Research. It is officially summer. We are in 4th of July week. I think most of America isn't working this week, and Sports Research can help you look great and feel great for everything that you're doing besides working. Professional athletes from the UFC to the NFL to great bloggers at Barstool Sports have used Sweet Sweat. They use the collagen. They have the at-home workout kit. They take great vitamins. And you can get all of those things for 30% off if you use code TOKEN at sportsresearch.com and use it when you check out. So here's what we're doing today. We are interviewing two of my favorite athletes of all time. Will Compton joins the pod. He is the host of Bussin' with the Boys. He is the CEO of Bussin' with the Boys, the driver behind that brand. He also is a linebacker in the NFL. He's played for the Titans. He played for the Raiders. He played for the Washington, formerly known as Redskins, Washington football team. We also have one of my favorite people on the planet, let alone a great athlete. We have Paul Rabil. Paul Rabil is the creator of the PLL along with his brother Michael Rabil. He also is a midfielder. He wears the number 99. He is having an electric season playing for the PLL Cannons. And we talked to them both about being two things at once, how to balance being an athlete and a personality. We talked to them about their careers and what's next. And then in the spirit of talking about being two things at once, I want to take a deep dive into what it takes to break through in both sports and entertainment, which these two gentlemen are doing. First up is Will Compton. All right, I'm happy you're here.
I'm stoked to be here.
Okay, give us a rundown on who you are and what you're about for everybody who listens to this. I'll have introduced you glowingly before this starts.
My name is Will Compton.
Yes.
I am currently a free agent in the NFL going on year 9. Mm-hmm. I co-host a podcast called Bussin' with the Boys with my best friend Taylor Lewan. Shout out to boy Taylor. Go subscribe and rate 5 stars to Bussin' with the Boys. What more do you need? I know we only have 35 minutes. So.
Okay. I want to hear about being a journeyman. Talk about that.
Yeah, so I grew up small town Missouri. I got a scholarship to go play at the University of Nebraska. Played in Nebraska
for 5
years.
Program.
Yeah, awesome.
Captain.
Football program. Yes. Was undrafted. Was not a combine guy. I went undrafted to the Washington at the time Redskins, now Washington football team.
Can't say that anymore.
Yeah.
Yep.
The Washington football team.
R.I.P. Yep.
Yeah, R.I.P. I was practice squad my entire first year.
And how much do you make in a practice squad?
You make $112,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you mind me asking that?
No, I don't
Okay.
mind. I actually was just on the Yak having to talk about the practice squad and making that money and would you do it and stuff like that.
Okay.
But no, I don't mind that. I was on practice squad the entire first year with Washington, which is actually was fortunate because usually a practice squad guy is like a revolving door. They're on a practice squad 1 week, they can be on another practice squad, so you can move a lot.
For different teams?
For different teams, yeah.
Okay.
So it can be a brutal lifestyle for some guys. My second year, I made the team outright. I was on special teams most of the year. I got to start 5 games. I played well in my 5 starts, which earned me a good opportunity to start in my third year. Was injured in preseason my third year. Ended up taking over the job in week 8, I believe. Was the starter the rest of the year. Was a captain and started the next year. And then 2017, mostly backup role, special teams. 2018, I went to the Titans on a 1-year deal. That's when I started Bussin' with the Boys after that season.
Yeah.
And then I was on the Saints for a short stint in August after you guys visited.
Yeah.
That's a funny story.
That was funny. Let's pause and tell that story.
Okay, so I was a backup and special teamer for the majority of the Titans. And I was 20, I forget how old I was, 20, late 20s.
What position?
Linebacker. Okay. Linebacker, I apologize. And so my thought was, I'm in my later 20s. You know, I'm an undrafted white linebacker. You can find anybody to run and tackle. And so I might not have another opportunity to play. And if I do, I'll be on a 1-year minimum deal. So I kind of knew what my stitch was.
You knew what this was going to look like.
Yeah, whatever coach wanted me or whatever team wanted me, they kind of already knew what I brought to the table. They know they knew they were going to get to lowball me in the market.
Yep.
So my thought was I had always aspired to start a podcast and finally mustered up the courage. Taylor's like, yo, I'll do it with you. I started branding for the podcast, and my thought with my agent was I'm going to basically say no to everybody in OTAs. I had a few teams call for tryouts and come, work out, and if it works out, we'll sign them that day, blah, blah, blah. Saying no to all that stuff, skip as much training camp as I could because I had teams calling me during training camp, which is when you guys started to recruit. And it's funny because we started DMing back and forth with Gaz.
Yep.
Got on the phone with you.
Yep.
Remember, I thought you were a guy at first.
Yeah.
And
which I made you aware of.
Right. You're like, yeah, I guess I'm one of the guys. But I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And then Gaz and Erika wanted to fly, was flying to Nashville.
Yeah.
The day that Gaz and Erika are flying in, the Saints call for the third time because a couple of the guys went down. Hey, we want to get Will on the first flight out. He's the only one working out. He'll work out. We'll sign him if he's conditioned, blah, 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 and this and that. So I don't answer the call from my agent for the first half of the day because I knew you guys were flying in, and my thought was I want to sit with them and talk to them about busting with the boys.
My cake and
try to enjoy both cakes. And I called them late. Oh, sorry, I missed your call. You can get me out on a plane tomorrow. Yeah, because they wanted to get me out on a flight that day, and I'm trying to not answer calls.
You're trying
not
to get on
a
flight that day.
Yes, so I can go to the meeting with Barstool and then fly out the next morning. I fly out to the Saints the next morning, work out, end up making the team, and I get hurt right after during the fourth preseason game. I get an injury settlement. I'm on the quote unquote couch for like 8 weeks, I believe, and then that's when I got signed to Oakland. I play for Oakland, end up starting and buying myself another year because I played well to where I was like, oh, damn, this is, I'm getting to resurrect my career a little bit. I know I'm going to have another year. Play well with the Raiders. Raiders are trying to lowball and offer a 1-year minimum deal. We tell them I can do the same thing as I did last year. I can wait until last minute, sign on with the team, and then, play that year out. And in the meantime, build bussin' while I'm doing all this stuff.
Which you've done an incredible job.
Fortunately, Mike Vrabel texts me right when I was telling my fiance we get married in a couple weeks. I was telling my fiance, hey, I'm going to need to call the Raiders and I'm going to need to make this move to Vegas and take their offer that they had offered in June. Fortunately, Coach Vrabel texts me. He's like, are you in shape or have you been eating too many ribeyes and smoking too many cigars? And I'm like, just give me a few days in pads. I should be good to go. I get to work out with them the next day, get signed with the best case scenario, the Titans. And play with them this past year.
Okay. And how do you feel? So I think you're an interesting person because, one, I think it takes great humility and confidence to play the game that you've been playing, which is a wait-and-see game for how many years now? You know what I mean?
Yeah, this is like my third year.
You have to have the discipline to stay. Like I always, whenever we're on the phone, you are always going into a workout, coming out of a workout. Like there's some panting involved. Like you're going into a workout, coming out of a workout.
Yeah.
So you have to have the discipline and like the self-motivation to stay in shape. Then you're always waiting for the call, which I would find that would give me so much anxiety. And then the thing I love about you is you're like, all right, Saints called, I'm on the flight the next day. Raiders call, I'm on the flight. Then when Rabel texts, or not Rabel.
Yeah, Vrabel. When Vrabel texts
when Vrabel texts you, you're like, okay, I'm just going to walk down the street. But how do you think about like living with that? First question is, how have you managed living with that uncertainty?
The first off season was tough. It was more of just, you speak on a lot. I'm an avid listener of Token CEO. Everybody should download and get this in your life as well. You got to have like self-awareness. You got to understand where you actually are. Like, yes, we all have the ego where you need to dream huge and visualize and be like, what do I want out of life? What do I want to be? Who do I want to become? And you want to believe those things. But also at the same time, you
can't buy your bullshit.
Right. You can't buy your bullshit. Like you got to have some self-awareness to you to where you understand where you're actually at. Mm-hmm. And I felt I did that with my year on the Titans, like being around enough to just know how they look at guys, how they were, I would be slotted in the offseason. And I did have a belief and confidence that I know who I am and I know teams and coaches and players, I have enough relationships to where any team that does want me, I know it's going to be because of they understand where I've came from and who I am through other coaches. Not because they click on film and they're like, oh, he's the biggest, he's the strongest, he's the fastest, get him here. But because of all those intangible things. The first year was a little uncomfortable because, again, I talk about it all the time. You go 23 years of your life to get in a career that lasts 2.8 years on average. And your identity is wrapped up with being a football player. Yes, I've lived my dream. Like, I understand how, and I'm grateful. That. Yes, like I have done it. Like since a little boy, I have accomplished the ultimate goal.
You won the gridiron.
Yeah, I won. But there's like a fear in it because you've identified that way your entire life.
You're like, now what?
Right. And then there's this anxiety of what am I actually going to transition into?
Yep.
I know I love doing some real estate stuff. I know I've always been a guy that lives in my networks, that have done a good job networking.
Very entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's like, but what do I actually want to do? And, being an avid listener to podcasts, I knew I wanted to podcast.
Yeah.
And it was more so like it was stuff that was written in my journal, be the first active player to have a podcast,
Yep.
be the first active coach if I
Yep.
got into coaching. And it was like, I should really do it. Charo, she kept telling me I needed to do it. I would have friends that'd be like, yo, you should really do this. And then Taylor being like, yo, I'll do it with you. I made the decision like, hey, I'm going to do it. Didn't know what it was going to be called. I just knew I was going to do
Yep.
it. And that was in December, and Taylor was like, hey, I'll do it with you. And it kind of like,
you're like,
it
"Let's
kind of
go."
freed me a little bit
Yeah.
to like, I have a best friend doing this with
Yeah.
me now. And so saying no to teams on trying out, I didn't know if I said no, if I would get a call again, because you don't know how many opportunities are actually going to come knocking. And then 2, doing this podcast where we kind of sling it and we're kind of raw and we're kind of edgy.
Yeah. How do you think that factors
Like I
in?
didn't know if I was going to play myself out of my career.
Correct.
Because I'm not a Taylor where
Yeah.
you're so talented that it's like he's going to
We
have a
need
job.
him.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like this is a minimum guy.
Yeah.
This could be a distraction. Like
Yeah.
it's not even worth it,
Right.
no matter how
Yep.
intangible this and that
Yep.
is. So I did have that fear, but once I went through that year, and when I got injured on the Saints, and I played well too, so I was stoked that like, okay, I can just show up and not just show up and play, but I am like I can pick
deliver.
it up fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can deliver if called upon.
Yeah.
And I had to nurse my ankle back to full health, but just sitting on the couch and experiencing Sundays without football actually in my life, I was able to start compartmentalizing it, that it's not that bad on the other side. It's not that what I was mustering
You're not
up in my head.
empty and
I'm not. Yeah,
lost
there's
and
not
crying
some exactly. There's not some empty space that
There's
the
like that, like all by
Yeah,
myself.
exactly.
Like you're crying.
Exactly.
And, like, eating ice cream.
It wasn't as bad as I was thinking it would be. In the Titans, I was obviously pulling for the boys at the time. They were losing, and when they lost, I'd be like, thank God I don't have to go in the next day and experience the bubble that that athletes have to experience when they lose a game. And then I went to the Raiders, had nothing to lose essentially. I was kind of in the mindset like it doesn't, this is
Let's go.
Yeah, like Bussin's going a
balls to
little
the wall.
bit.
Yeah.
We're talking with Barstool.
Yeah.
Like it was just kind of like I have nothing to lose. This is just going to help. And I got to the Raiders, and the starter, they were having troubles with the starter. The coach asked me like, "Hey, can you handle the green dot?" It was John Gruden's the head coach of the Raiders. He's brothers with Jay Gruden, who was my head coach when I was on the Washington football team for 5 years. So he kind of knew about me. And I was just always like, yeah, I'm ready to go. Whenever you guys are ready, I'm ready to go. And then I started those 3 games at the end of the year, and I played well to where it was just like, what life am I living right now? Like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
I felt amazing.
You're having the
right.
You're
like
having
when,
your cake and
right.
eating it
Like
too.
when
Yeah.
given my chance, I know I can still deliver
can
and
perform.
play.
Yep.
Because you kind of don't know when you haven't really played linebacker in a year. Have you ran down on kickoffs? And you're doing this thing on the side where you're kind of being an example and showing guys that you can balance a couple things when you compartmentalize well. And I was just on top of the world, I felt like. And so going into this last off season, I basically just had no stress about it.
Yeah,
it was
you're like,
more
I can do both.
Yeah, like I can do
I'm gonna
both.
fling this whole
yeah,
thing.
I can figure it out.
And
then I got to this year, and it's like the same.
so what's going to happen this fall?
I'm not sure. Everyone asks, and they're like, "Hey, will you come to the?" And it's like, teams need a call first. I mean, there's been conversations, but they're light conversations. Now, at this time of the year, in the spot that I'm at, in the box that I'm usually in, rookies are getting evaluated. They're trying to see what they have in new guys that have came on the team. And teams are trying to figure out where their depth chart might land. And then training camp, when you put pads on, that'll sort itself out.
So you've got a little bit more time.
Right. I essentially want the same kind of thing to happen. And then, the injury rate in the NFL is 100%. So linebackers get hurt. So I know I'll be on like those short lists. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. All right. I love it. So what is similar about you on the mic versus you on the field?
What's similar?
Yeah. Like what characteristics do you think you bring to the field that you bring to Boston?
I would say focus, discipline, all the things I've learned playing football and accomplishing things in football. It's like when I learned that, and this is like from Tony Robbins, there's this 4-corner chart. It's like belief, potential, action, result. And it's like people have the belief. but how much belief do you actually have in your potential? And when I realized, like, okay, it doesn't matter what anybody's telling me. Like, what do I truly believe? What kind of self-awareness do I have to balance that? What do I really think I could accomplish if I got myself uncomfortable enough to not worry about the opinions of others and the perceptions of what might come in the short term? And you just put a lot of action to stuff, mental, physical, nutritional, all this stuff, right? It's the same carryover, I feel like, in any area of your life. And then you're going to get some kind of result that's going to feed that ego, that belief side of you.
Yes.
Yeah. That's just going to funnel this circle.
You run the circuit. You run the box.
Same thing in a negative way.
Yes.
If you don't have too much belief, but mom believes in me, and I'll do this for mom. Even though I have low belief in my potential, I'm going to put my mom's action into it. I'm going to put a little action just to show her that I'm doing what I need to do. Mom, I tried this and that. And when I get little to no result, it's just going to feed my belief that, I told you, I knew that what mom said was wrong. I knew that what that nutritionist said was wrong. You're buying into that same circle. So when I figured that out, it was more of the same preparation, the same discipline, the same focus when putting together like Bussin' with the Boys. Like how much time, like somebody who's going to have a successful podcast, like how much time are they putting into it? Who am I watching from afar? Who am I inspired by? What can I actually take from them? What am I reading? How can I get better in areas that I know I'm weak in? Yeah. It's all of those things. It's the same carryover, I feel like, from football going into the podcast.
I think you've done an amazing job with the podcast. Like I remember we were nervous when we signed you because we had just done the Terry Rozier. We'd done a podcast with Terry Rozier, who was also an active player, and it was frankly like a fucking disaster. Like he mailed it in. It wasn't, he didn't have everything that you're talking about. He probably had belief, definitely had potential, but there was no action and therefore very little result. And it was disingenuous. Do you know what I mean? And the thing I always loved about you was you were always the CEO of Bussin'. Like you self-proclaimed, you're like, I'm going to make this thing stick. Like you had that belief. You understood how good it could be. Like I remember, you guys being like, could this be big as PMT? Could this be as big as PMT? I think it could be as big as you want it to be. But there was always the question of like, what's happening on the field? How's that going to affect these guys?
No question.
You were recording everything in advance. We were like, it has to be real time. And I actually think it's really admirable the way you and Taylor have balanced it. There was it last season he got suspended?
Two seasons ago when he got suspended. Because we were doing it. That was when I was waiting for the Raiders to call, and Taylor was suspended with the PED.
Yeah. So Taylor had some trouble. It's hard, like, what do you do? Because now you have a podcast. Like, I kind of feel like that too in my world, where I'm like, I'm really just trying to run a business here, and I have this podcast. Like, how do I deal with stuff happening in the business on the podcast? And I always admire you guys about how you do that, and I think you've made Bussin' feel alive. Like you go to Nashville, you guys are very much a thing. Talk about your tier ones.
So the tier 1, 2, 3 thing is something like Taylor coined everybody. Like, if you're about it and you watch it every Wednesday and you're tweeting, you're doing all this stuff, you put the wolf in your username, you're a tier 1. Tier 2s, you watch it, you might catch up on it later in the week. You see all the clips, you do all the things on social, but you're a tier 2. Tier 3s is somebody who you don't really listen or watch the episodes, but you see all the social clips. You're engaged that way. You might watch from afar. You don't want to necessarily admit that you're a fan. That's what we call like Vrabel and people around the Titans organization.
They're tier 3.
Because they notice, they see it, they like
the
it,
silent
they take
majority
it in.
is what we call them.
They take it in. Taylor coins it to all the tier stuff.
I love the tiers.
I like
think it's such a dick way to describe your fans.
Right.
It's amazing.
I know. Me personally, I hate dividing any like separating people.
Like, can't we all just get along?
Right.
We love all of you.
Like, I just want to call them all the wolf pack.
No, I only want the tier 1.
I want to call them the wolf pack. Like everyone's in if you're in.
I love the wolf pack.
I'm all about that. But dude, I mean, we probably feared just as much as you did, because when you are delivering something and you need to hit, like, at first we were just going to do it in the off season because it's very scary, especially when Taylor was going through a suspended thing. The Titans started off 2-4.
Yeah, 100%. Taylor's like, how the hell am I getting on the mic? We're losing. I'm on the bench. Everybody's pissed at me. The fan base is pissed at me.
Because even when he came back, he was getting a lot of holding penalties.
Yeah.
And
then he fucked up. He had a bad play in a game. Vrabel was pissed at him. And it's like, that's real.
That stuff is real. And I'm sitting at this point, I'm sitting at home and I'm like, fuck, man, I don't even want to tweet about Bussin'. Yeah. And how am I supposed to muster up the confidence and be like, another episode's out, subscribe, for the boys. Like, let's stay in it.
Not talking about the Titans, anything but the Titans.
And it's even different. Like, even more so, last year we were 11-5, so we were solid the majority of the year. But even last year, like, I am now on the team, and I am seeing, like, Ray would joke on me, let's check in with our social media manager, and he would text me, and we'd have conversations in the hallway, like, hey, like, let's maybe, just think about this. And he would just make sure my head's probably always kind of in the right spot. Because when you're a head coach sitting back watching your team and watching your players, like, you want to let them be themselves, but also, like, where's your head at type of thing.
Yeah,
too.
like to get a check-in on.
Yeah, like, let's make sure
you're
you're always having the team first. Yeah.
You are a liability.
Right,
You're a great asset, but also a liability.
Right. Especially like...
And uncomfortable for him because he doesn't have control.
Correct.
Like Bill Belichick would never put up with having a
Yeah,
boss.
I know.
Do you know what
I know,
mean?
no doubt. And there's just like this, especially when you have a personality, because you'll play into like the whole signing the best third stringer special teamer of all time thing, like the whole self-sucking thing that Ray wants to talk about. But it's like, but also I'm not like, it's not like I'm getting some accolade when I'm saying I'm the greatest. Like I'm playing into a joke. But there's all those types of fears and too that you get with all that stuff. But it's worked out, man. It's been a grind because we were just going to do it in the off season. Talking about them losing. We were nervous as hell about doing it. But I remember talking to McAfee on the phone because I was getting some mentoring from him and like Brendan Schaub and these guys. He's like, look, if you're going to do it, like be consistent with it. Like if you have 15 episodes in the bank, don't get them all out before the season. Like just go one. If you're doing once a week, stay at once a week. Try to do it as much as you can because that's how you're going to build your audience. And that's when Taylor and I went into, when we started talking to you guys, there was 1 week we backlogged 12 episodes in 1 week. Late July, heat at an all-time high. We were shuffling producers around, and we just made it happen. But it's been a ride, man.
It's a ride.
It's been a ride. And we're thankful that you guys have came along to help out and show us some ways and give us guidance.
Do you like being here?
Oh, I love it. I love it because you have resources to succeed. I want to say one thing that wasn't what you thought it might be, which is a good thing. It turns out to be a good thing, was when you sign on, you think that there's going to be this lift. Like we would have to take a load off of ourselves and now we put it on you guys. And it's more of like you have the resources to succeed even more. And how much are you going to tap into those resources? And on your guys' end, you kind of get to see how bad people want it in this building.
Yeah, you do.
Because you see the chaos, you see the love, you see the loyalty, you see the bright lights that you want with Barstool. But when you're in it, it's quieter on the second. It's quiet on the second floor, quieter on the first floor at times, and you just see that people here work hard for that stuff that you see out there. So you get to kind of see how bad do people want it, or do they just want to post a TikTok video coming in at I saw the intern thing. Poor guy. But for sure, but you get to kind of see that stuff. Like talking to Biz, he was one of my first conversations because he welcomed us in.
Biz is an animal.
Biz is an animal, and he's like, "Look, there's no taking a break now that you just joined. Like it's not going to just come to you now. Yeah, he's like, you got to work even harder now. You have to work harder. Like they're going to help, but they're not just going to give you
it for you.
Right, exactly.
And I like that. I think your 4-box is perfect. I think that we have good belief in people. Like we see talent, we recognize talent, we pursued you. You know your potential. We believe in your potential. It's the action and results. That's where people get lost here.
Right.
Is that they forget about the action.
Yeah.
And that's the Biz, Biz to me, McAfee's the same way, and I feel the same with you and Taylor, is you all believe in your potential. You know your potential is bigger by tying up with us. We believe in your potential, blah, blah, blah. But it's like the relentless action. It's like the drive in football. Like it's 1 yard at a time. But if you mail that in or you get complacent or you realize, hey, if I slow down, nobody really notices. People notice. They're just not doing anything about it.
No question. And I think obviously the common denominator that myself, Spin Chicklets, Pat, and all of us have is being athletes. Like when you're young, you don't necessarily, like in high school, we're so much better than everybody playing football that you can take plays off or you can lax and you don't even really know what you're doing. But in college, when you have to literally watch yourself every day in front of your peers with your coach that's telling you It's all performance based in the athletic world. It's all performance based. So much so that you watch film. It would be like everybody out here
watching themselves.
You're the head coach that addresses every day. There's a team meeting.
Yeah.
You break up. Big Cat's got a group of interns, like all these people, and you all sit in an office, and there's a big screen coming down, right? And you guys watch everyone's demeanor throughout the day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's
like how much you're on your phone.
Show.
Yeah, like how much you're on your phone, how many bathroom breaks you're taking, what are you actually doing sitting here?
Yeah.
Because you have to execute what the game plan is, right? And so you're young learning this in college, but you learn it. You got to learn it hard. You got to learn it disciplined. Like college is way harder than being in the pros.
Yeah.
In the pros, you kind of figure out how long somebody lasts by how much they carry these characteristics and traits to the pro level. And I think it's the same carryover in business and life and everything in general. You're going to have young people that they might just not know how to work hard and have that hunger
and nobody's
yet.
teaching them.
Right.
Like that's also my realization is like, I'm realizing I think we're doing a shitty job of teaching people. Like I had this realization today or yesterday where I'm like, we have this whole tier of managers in the production group and the social group and business. And it's like, we never taught, I'm mad at myself because I never taught them how to manage somebody else. And I'm like, so I'm pissed where I'm like, hey, this person isn't performing. Did you have a one-on-one with them? Did you set the goals for them? Did you review the tape with them? And it's like, I never told them that they needed to do that. And it's not everyone is a self-start. Like, I think part of being an exceptional athlete is that you have to exist at a very high performance and have a very strong degree of self-propulsion because it's so highly competitive. And it's like, that has to manifest. So that, sorry, I was a little not
No, I love that. I think it's the same way. Like I realized that too over my time just operating, busting with the boys. Like, I would internally, I mean, Garrett knows, I would be pissed about certain things not getting done. But if I truly sat back and self-evaluated myself and how I'm actually
helping
leading
that
and
happen.
managing it happen, like
I'm the same way.
They don't have, they just don't understand because I'm not showing them what exactly that I'm wanting. Yeah. I'm expecting it out of them and I'm not showing them not necessarily just what I'm wanting, but also like the why behind it as well
and
why
how
we want to operate.
Get there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like when something wouldn't happen, I would just need to sit with myself after the anger clears away. Yeah. And before I send that text to like Garrett or somebody.
You gotta like sit on it for a minute.
Yeah.
Like,
and
Garrett, you fucking idiot. Like,
yeah. Like, how is this so fucking hard? You know what I mean?
Totally.
But you
and
check
then you're
yourself.
Like, oh, I know. I had the same thing. Like I've been like all over the token guys where I'm like, all right, like we need to keep pushing.
Yeah.
And I'm pissed at them. I'm like, why aren't we pushing? We're doing ad reads and interviews. Like that's not very interesting. And then I had this realization like last Friday night and Saturday morning of like, all right, I have to model it. I have to like go fetch the articles that I want to talk about. I have to lay out the structure for the interview. Like, and that's a good exercise.
For sure.
If people don't pick it up, then you don't pick it up. But I agree with you. I think that's part of being a leader.
Absolutely. And I've learned a lot about myself. A buddy of mine, Adi Kunalik, who's the CEO of Open Doors.
Yes, so smart. Love that business.
And he put me on this book called Traction. And that was like a book that helped me compartmentalize. He's like, you're so motivated to like do all these things. Like you need to start figuring out each component of it and how to map it out to put it into steps, to put it in a way to communicate because you're chasing all these different chickens. And he's like, the rabbit who chases two chickens catches neither.
Okay.
And that was a quote from that really resonated with me because I'm like, I'm definitely chasing more than one
ADHD?
chicken all the time. I don't know. I mean, I've never been like diagnosed
but you're like,
ADHD.
I want to do all these
when
things.
I'm into something, I'm pretty obsessive about
same.
it. Like when it's football, like I'm just obsessive about podcasting. I'm very obsessive about what I'm doing.
Merch, you guys are obsessive about.
For sure. We can have one phone call with y'all to where it like whether it's a learning phone call, a good phone call, bad phone, whatever it is. There's like a little spark that goes. So we're like, all right, we're not doing enough.
Yeah, we need to do more.
Yeah.
Talk about how you do the ad reads.
Oh man, we've been up and down with the ad reads. When they first started, I would do ad reads the first year, first and second year with you guys when I was in Oakland. I would just be we would wait until we got the ad reads.
Yep.
And then I would be in the closet.
Did we yell at you about the ad reads?
No, but we would wait till last minute because you guys were just starting to sell us. Yeah. And we just didn't know how the game worked.
Yeah.
And I would take my H6N, is that what it is? H6N recorder, and I would sit. We would go to the team hotel the night before a game, and I would sit in the closet the night before a game. Do the ad reads because he'd be like, make sure there's no sound, this and that, the other, because we never knew what we were recording. We had backlogged all the episodes, so we weren't able to do them in real time. Now we set an alarm.
I love this. Tell the story of this. This is great.
So Taylor and I were doing a pod together, and it was just me and him. We were doing like a catch-up pod. And we decided that we wanted to start doing ad reads in real time, like with the episode. So I would have to come back in on a different day with Garrett or somebody. They'd have to record me. But we wanted to be, because the feedback we were getting was like, if you can have a little banter with each other, like make it a part of the episode. So Taylor and I would set an alarm every 15 minutes. Like say we wanted to do an hour-long podcast and we had 4 ad reads. We'd set it every 15 minutes. And when the alarm would go off, no matter what we're doing, you have to go and look at the screen and do ad read.
Jump into the ad read.
Jump into the ad read. No preparation, no nothing. And you would just look at the screen. Taylor, he's the best because he struggles at reading a little bit. His eyesight he should probably get his eyes checked. Yeah, he's like squinting and leaning up and he's mispronouncing words. And we just have the greatest time. And then now, whenever we have a guest on, the guest usually has to do an ad read.
Yep.
Which we had fun because the times we were doing it, we had a couple comedians on back to back. Josh Wolf, he was the best. But he would just laugh hysterically, and then he'd want to do them with us. So we just kind of like we're just all in on riffing on the ad reads without any dialogue.
The alarm with the ad read is amazing.
And we don't even know what we're about to advertise. It comes on, you got to go off the cuff. Yeah.
All right, my last question for you is 2021 Futures Female. Like, how do you feel about the For the Boys? Like, do you get a lot of shit for that?
No, not really. Like, we have.
I just want to let you know that I put a sticker on my door that said,
yeah, absolutely.
If you're not for the boys, you're against them.
Yeah, you got one of our stickers on there. That's why I'm always putting in parentheses girls too. Like, because I know like as you grow, like I know our loyal, our day one audience, everyone understands.
Tier ones.
Yeah, tier ones, they understand. Like we have female fans and they're the best. And I guess I'm subconsciously aware that as we grow, it's going to be a new audience who's not going to know my story, who's going to just see us slinging it, who's going to think we're like some arrogant dudes sometimes. And I'm very much aware of the whole For the Boys thing. Like when we're trying to grow these audiences, that they're not going to have a background in it. So I am sort of always thinking about it because I don't want to have that divide because I love when our female fans are loud.
I think girls can have For the Boys attitude.
Absolutely.
Like I think I have a For the Boys attitude. I love the boys.
Yeah. I mean, it originated from the locker room. Yeah. It's like, hey, the media would talk like, hey, what's the deal? It's like, hey, you're either for the boys or you're against them. Like either get on the train or get off. Like that's what it is. And that's what it kind of originated from and was born out of. But love the female fans. We actually want to do more things about For the Girls, stuff in October.
Oh, maybe we could do that.
I would love to collab.
Okay, I'm going to come down and we'll do that. I'm coming to the bus.
Yeah. Hey, this is awesome.
So what I love about what Will had to say is, one, I have a huge amount of appreciation and recognition of living with so much uncertainty. You think about Will's professional football career and how much uncertainty and spur of the momentness and need for constant preparation without any real line of sight into what the end goal or end game is. I have so much admiration for that. I also loved the 4-corner chart. Like I want to do everything in a 4-corner chart. The idea of having a belief in yourself, recognizing your potential, taking action, and driving results. I think this is something that anyone and everyone can use, whether you want to be great in your life, whether you care about being great at your job, or you want to be great on the field. I'm also really excited for Will that he's put down roots in Nashville and he's laying the foundation for an incredible brand with Bussin' with the Boys. Speaking of putting down roots, Cross Country Mortgage is the official mortgage partner of Barstool Sports. Rates right now to get a mortgage are unbelievably low. Why would you pay the bank more than you absolutely have to? So take advantage of strong, low rates to get a mortgage. So if you're looking to buy an investment property, if you're looking to buy an apartment or a house, now is the great time to do that. Cross Country Mortgage makes it super simple to figure out how much you can save on a monthly basis and how to manage the lifetime of your loan. If you are a homeowner and you haven't refinanced yet, you may be leaving thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars on the table. And the great thing about Cross Country Mortgage is you can call and you can get a very quick, free quote. They also give you a free home evaluation. Who doesn't want that? So go to crosscountrymortgage.com/barstool to learn more about your future home buying. And then, as always, we need to say Cross Country Mortgage LLC, NMLS 3029, All loans subject to underwriting approval. www.nmlsconsumeraccess.org. Next up is Paul Rabil. So Paul Rabil is, I would say Paul Rabil is the athlete that I'm closest to, probably closer than Dion. But Paul Rabil is, I have so much respect for Paul Rabil. We have a great conversation, which we'll kick to now, where we talk about the similarities between the WWE and the PLL and emerging sports leagues, the need to drive characters, how Paul is balancing being an executive within the league as well as being a player, how he's thinking about his own career and what he thinks is needed to grow talent and to grow brands in an extremely crowded emergent sport space.
Half the time, I have to either really be diligent around focusing on when I'm a player versus an operator. And that's not just for me so I can be better on the field and be better in the office, but it's also for the players and the fans so they know what they're getting because they're like, this guy's serious. Like, is this? And that's what I actually love doing. I'm just coming over from PMT. I love doing their show because that's like my humor. But I also realized walking out of there, I'm like, oh, it's going to be super confusing for a lot of people because we just did a 40-minute bit on like the whole piece of me being an owner player.
Okay.
But, you know, you got to have some fun.
It's okay that it's confusing. Like,
yeah. I mean, you're the marketing genius.
I don't know about that, but I think like what makes it so interesting is that it is complex. Your life is complex. You're an executive and a player, and you know, you're sensitive and an alpha male. Like it's like there's all those things. Like I think that's what makes you great.
That's also what I think I've worked on from 2020 to 2021 is being less sensitive.
Yeah, I think so. You seem less sensitive right now. Seriously.
Yeah. I'm back to like being pissed on the field and
and it
embracing
shows.
that.
I also think you were trying I remember that in the early times of Barstool where you're trying so hard and you were so earnest to make it work. Like you weren't sure it was going to work. So there's like insecurity that comes with that and pressure that you put on yourself. And then what I always feel about with you and Mike, so for people who listening to this, Mike's also been on the podcast. He's Paul's brother, runs the PLL with Paul, is that you guys, and it's impossible not to, you take it so hard.
So personally.
Everything that fails is you guys take it so hard and you could feel that. And now I don't feel it so much from you.
Yeah.
Now I think you're like, fuck you, I'm here.
I mean, you're great. You shoot us texts and like tell us to keep going and fuck the noise and all this stuff. You're one of our you're like one of our linchpins there. But I mean, you know this from your days elsewhere and even here. It does stick with you because the buck stops with you. And so there's never a moment where you or I or Mike can be like, let's just let this play out and fully let go. Yeah. Our job is to scrape the bottom of the barrel every time. And if we did everything we could, at least we were like, all right, we
tried our best. Yeah.
You have to scrape it because there's no one else that's going to replace the toilet paper, flush the fucking toilets.
Totally. You're doing it all.
Sweep the dust out of the corner.
The other thing I was thinking about this morning, I was thinking about it in the shower, is that I had a boss who, when I'm asked a question, I always answer it of like everything that could be wrong or all the doubts that I have or like things that aren't perfect. And she used to always be like, stop. Like you tell the story of who you want to be and what you want it to look like and the best, like you've got to sell where you are, not share what you're worried about. Yeah. And I also feel for you guys, I feel you've also made that transformation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really important. And I think that's also our awareness around who we're talking to and whether there's a microphone on or whether we're reporting to a board. And that's what Mike's been really helpful for me is I'm actually the optimist of the duo. And I'm always like, we're going to figure this out. It's going to work. We're going to will this to happen. And Mike brings in the part.
Mike's a realist.
Yeah, he's a realist. And he's also like, we cannot walk into our board or our investors with optimism. We have to be very direct. And then obviously like share upside models and stuff. So, but to our businesses, we're in the business of entertainment. And there's a lot of narrative that we have the ability to impact. And So I think you're right.
Okay, so you're happy on the Cannons.
Yeah.
Happy, you're playing great. Team's awesome.
Yeah. Team's great.
I'm obsessed with that Lyle Thompson.
He's unbelievable.
He's unbelievable. I think you guys have done such an incredible. I mean, I'm obviously such a huge fan. Like, I'm such a huge fan. But I think you've done such an incredible job of telling athletes' stories. I think there's a couple things I really hand to you guys. One is I think the operation is very, very slick.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean slick in a fancy way, as in like extremely efficient. Like I was at the Boston game on the sidelines, and like you have guys running all the time, getting the clips to the, like just watching the system. We made a video on it, but how you think about social media and content, and you describe yourself in the entertainment business, it shows operationally in the game. And I love that. And I think you do an amazing job of it. And there's no detail. Like there's one guy, he carried around a towel in his back pocket, and I was watching him just run the entire game. And it's to kneel on because it's turf and it's like, it was hard. And he knew, and he put the camera on the towel, and it was like no detail is left unturned. And then you have these big characters, and I think you've done a really incredible job of showing players holistically, and also embracing all of their different stories. So I think that's really incredible.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And we're reaching a place right now in our third season, and this is like the nuance and the uncontrollable of any pro sport, is that you tell these stories of your stars and you hope they play well.
Yeah.
And right now our stars are kicking ass.
Yeah, your stars are, including
Miles,
you are. Yeah.
Rob,
Miles having a great year, catching a lot of shit because I switched you from Miles.
I mean,
I am.
It's like
love Miles, so Miles is my guy.
David Stern always wanted Lakers Knicks or Lakers Celtics in the final, and then it was like Lakers Bulls. Yeah. And like Bud Selig for a while wanted to make sure like the Yankees Sox were in the playoffs, and because those are your prize fighters. Mm-hmm. And you want your stars to play well. That helps. It doesn't mean your league can't achieve when they don't, but when they do,
it just helps.
It's great.
It just makes everything. And I also think everybody seems so fired up to play in front of fans. Yeah, you can feel, like I felt it with the WWE when we went to WrestleMania for the first time in a year, had been live, and just the change in the performance was palpable. I felt the same. What
was one of the learning experiences, or one of the exciting things that you picked up on since joining the board at the WWE that you didn't have elsewhere?
I think the WWE is, first of all, the WWE gets zero credit for how fucking smart that company is. That company is smart. The way they think about live event production is exceptional. They put on, when they're at full go, they put on 3 live events every week. Yeah. They have character development. They have storylines. There's athleticism. There's the performance. The way that they manage that production, they essentially are a traveling circus, where similar to you guys actually, but the way that they make character development so central to the product and so central to the production, it's one of the most inspiring things I've ever seen. And they set it up exactly the same everywhere they go. Yeah. So Vince McMahon runs the whole thing from a place he calls Gorilla. Yep. And it's always the same dimensions, same people, same seats. The packs of gum are in the same place. The waters are in the same place. The props are in the same place. And the thing that they have is, like, you walk in the perimeter of the ring outside, and it's like the seamstresses and the makeup artists and the coaches and the people who stretch them. Like, it's really amazing. And I think you guys have done this too. What I'm excited about in lacrosse is, like, how do you keep telling those stories in a way that becomes more dimensional? Like, you probably hate this, so like Matt Gaudette guy bites off his finger last weekend. Was it last weekend? 2 weekends ago.
A couple weekends.
2 weekends ago. Like, I know you hate that stuff, but like, I loved that. Yeah. I mean, it was so obnoxious. But like, people are interested in one professional athlete biting off another professional athlete's finger.
I mean, I think people, and this is what
and you can't script that.
To the WWE's credit, they are one of the more traditional companies when you think about like pro wrestling. And I'm familiar with the Gorilla. No one used to ever talk about the Gorilla. Right. And they have this saying called kayfabe, where you hold character at all times. Yep. They've embraced modern media, especially with the network, and they now take cameras behind the scenes. Yep. And it's kind of started with divas. And it was like, these wrestlers have character, but you can also learn about them. Yep. And to your point, like, people want to know about the athletes.
Yeah.
And the way I used to say it was, last second shots and come from behind victories are viral moments in sports, but they become perennial when you know who that athlete was deeply.
And you care for his or her story.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like Christian Eriksen, did you watch? I mean, it's insane. Like, I'm going to root for that guy and Denmark for the rest of my life just by virtue of this crazy, catastrophic, near catastrophic moment. And I think the thing that you guys have actually that the WWE doesn't, that they struggle with, is they are network oriented. And it's so funny. I give NBC, I mean, I love to trash NBC, but like I give NBC a ton of credit for having both the WWE and you guys. It shows incredible range, like huge credit to them. But it's also interesting. Like, I sat with the NBC guys in your booth, and it's so obvious, like they're nervous, you know what I mean? Like, and they want things a certain way, which is why they're the network. They're not the creator.
Right.
And you have to hand it to them for giving power to the creators to create the story.
Yeah. And I think what you're referencing is it's a live product, and we put mics everywhere on athletes, and they have code and responsibilities to the cable service providers around swearing.
Totally.
So the tricky part that's nuanced, and we had like some audio hiccups in our first week because we increased mics and they were a little bit louder and sensitive this year. So we had to turn on what's basically a sensor box, and that sometimes interferes with the talent, and so you can't have talent clipping out. So we figured out in the first 2 years their level of comfortability with players being on air, mic'd up, and the risk there, and trusting us, because Vince runs live mics, and he'll kick you out of the show if you cuss. Completely, like you're done. Yeah. And we had one player on air with Paul Burmeister after a goal, and it was his first year in the league. He came on, and he was like, Paul was like, so tell us about that. He's like, man, this team's so fucking sick. And we were like, oh, like, it's an amazing thing to say, because it was so like genuine, so heartfelt, and real. Yeah. But God damn it. and so then they go, they pull back a little bit. But really what they're worried about is the innovation. It's technically not what they're used to. They're sending feeds from the site to Englewood to 30 Rock, back to Peacock. Yeah.
They're thinking of the signal bouncing. The thing I like about you guys, and I think you have to maintain, is you have the best of both. You understand digital. I mean, you understand social. You understand digital media. I think the single best thing that we've done is to make the process part of the story. Like, you've done that so well. Like RJ, like I'll give the RJ story. So like RJ is a fucking idiot. Love him, but he's such a fucking idiot. So RJ's hanging around in his, tie-dye shirt. He wears his tie-dye shirt every day. I love his loyalty to the brand. So RJ, I get a DM on Saturday morning at 6:55, and it says, "Hey, blank, the PLL is on NBC at noon. Right. We'd love if you could promote it." And I was like, "Hey, RJ," or I didn't know it was RJ. So I was like, "Hey, this would be slightly more compelling if you put my name in here versus the blank."
And I'm being nice because I'm an advisor to this company.
Not just some like random person. And then he's like, "Oh, hey, Erika, it's RJ." And I was like, "Oh, RJ." But so I posted it, and then you comment on it with the head exploding, and I'm like, that's what makes people. So I think you shouldn't worry about confusing people on which hat you wear.
Yeah.
You shouldn't. It's part of the process. It's what makes it interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And you will make it interesting. I think that's the challenge. And that's where we personalize it and get nervous. And Mike, for example, like, he has a really tricky dynamic of running the company, but watching his younger brother play.
Yeah.
And when his younger brother played like shit last year, all the flack that I was getting and not interjecting. And then in some cases, he'll just make a comment on social and people will go after him. And he gets so worried about it. And I'm like, Mike, people are going after you because you're important.
Tell us, I think you are the only person, pair / league that has been able to break out. What is it that, like, I'm obsessed with women's hockey. I think women's hockey is a dumpster fire. You look at, there was a big article this week in, I think, Ad Age about Athletes Unlimited, I think it's called, and they're doing it for softball and other sports. I'm like a huge fan of that. But like, what do you think it is? It's not one thing, but why have you guys succeeded?
Damn, that's a good question. So I'll try to give it two things. The first is that we are definitively the professional league for lacrosse, for a sport that has product market fit, and we have the best players. There's a ton of offshoot
Would you have said
leagues.
that? Would you have said that 2 years ago with the MLL?
Yes, because we got 90% of the best.
Yep.
We got everyone who wasn't under a multi-year deal.
Yep.
But it was still confusing in the marketplace.
Yep.
So now MLL is tucked into PLL.
Yep.
It's a lot easier to digest.
Were you like, yeah, when that happened?
Yeah.
Yeah, huge.
I mean,
that was such a fuck you.
We
It's
were
amazing.
all pumped. It helps us grow.
Sorry, can I just have a quick non sequitur? I know we're late, but so when Paul and Mike were first starting the PLL, I had put in a call to someone who I was very close to, who was, and you guys had come to me and we were talking about it, and I entrusted this person on like, hey, this thing is happening. Naturally, that person completely ratted me out, went to the MLL. It was like a very big drama, but I was like, when it got subsumed, I was like, let's go.
Yeah. I mean, you were in the war room with us.
That was such a victory.
That was well before we ever announced.
I mean, you were worried. You and I were talking about how many lawsuits you were going to have.
It was in your old office.
Yeah.
And we probably had 20 minutes in your calendar booked, and we went for like 2 hours.
Yeah.
And you were like, push my next meeting.
That was so good. I love it.
And you're like, this is shit I like. And you're rolling your sleeves up.
Okay, so sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So there's a lot of offshoot leagues. You call it like in football, there's the spring leagues, and hockey and basketball, there's the 3-on-3. And like in the end, you have to have the best players, or you don't stand a chance. Period. There's going to be a new golf league or a new soccer league.
Yeah.
Doesn't fucking matter.
I
It's
don't
what
think
MLS ran up against for a long time.
Yeah.
So you have to have that. So we have that. And the second is just like this resilience on the operational and the innovation side. And the resilience is to doing the daily stuff that takes an exorbitant amount of time, like building a ticket sales team, having phone calls with youth organizations and companies, marketing, creating assets nonstop. And then it's on the risk side of like doing things and trying to figure out things that other leagues don't. But it's Mike and I were at dinner last night, and he kept saying, we thought year 3 was going to be easier, and it's just more difficult.
It's just bigger.
Just thought it was going to get easier.
It's not going to get any easier.
Yeah. So I think that mindset, it's like, it is what it is. We signed up for this. You're in it. Yeah. We're playing with other people's capital. We don't take that lightly. And
I think that's also a very key component. So I was reading the Athletes Unlimited article, and they were talking about, they've gamified, everyone is trying to gamify the sports. You look at like the fan controlled, people don't want to work hard. They want to, consumers, they want to watch and see drama and brilliant athleticism and somebody win and somebody lose.
Exactly.
That's all and rivalry, right? That's what people want. I think there's becoming too much gimmicks. I also think that a huge thing that you guys did was to raise capital.
Yeah.
Huge. Because you didn't boot long-term capital.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to build the mothership, like the mother load of lacrosse, not, hey, we're going to take as much money as is going to last us through one season.
Yeah. And we talked about that because typically in a multiple series raise of a company, you do it based on hitting numbers and projections, and then you raise more. In sports, ideally, your investors would want that, but you've got to build a skyscraper, but dig really deep. So you have to have capital and committed capital for 10 years.
Yep.
Well, it's just way too stressful.
Well, and you're
Well, I want to make one comment though, outside of I love you and I love this podcast and thank you for having me. On the innovation front, and something that we've talked about before, what we learned is you also have to know when to not or when to stop innovating, to your point. So if it gets too gimmicky, like you said, fans aren't going to understand. And I think we actually pushed the envelope as far as it could go in this tour-based model. That was really hard
people could not get their
to
heads
get people to understand that teams aren't in cities. And it was like, if you're starting to rotate players or do other kind of gamification tactics, people are just going to give up.
Yep.
So that was one of the things that we talk about now is, all right, long-term, are we going to approach a city-based model? How does the sport evolve and all that stuff?
I love it. I'm such a huge fan.
Thanks.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks to Paul for joining. You can catch the PLL. You can watch Paul and the Cannons play on Long Island 4th of July weekend. They just played in Baltimore, Maryland last weekend, so they've got a great circuit going. If you want, go to the PLL. You can find out when and where the games are and get yourself some tickets. Speaking of going to a lacrosse game, Shady Rays. I love Shady Rays. I've been wearing the grit sunglasses. They're not even made for women, but I love the grit sunglasses. I also like because they have the blue polarized lens. What's great about Shady Rays is that they are premium sunglasses at the fraction of the price of big name brands. If you want to see how the sunglass industry works, you should Google sunglass industry and you'll see that basically one company makes all the brands and all the sunglasses. The point here being, why would you overpay for sunglasses? They have an awesome warranty. They also make great quality products. So the net is you either love your Shady Rays, you wear them all the time. Highly recommend with sunglasses, you buy like 5 pairs. They're so affordable that you can do that. Or you throw them out the window and they'll give you your money back. So to get yourself some Shady Rays, go to shadyrays.com, use code TOKEN for 50% off 2 or more pairs. I'm actually going to do this after I finish recording this. So 50% off 2 or more pairs. You buy one, you get one free. You can get 2 pairs of sunglasses for under $50, which is pretty awesome. Go to shadyrays.com, use code TOKEN, and get your shades now. After talking to Paul and to Will Compton, one of the biggest things that I was thinking about is what does it actually take to break through in sports and entertainment? I think when you look at all of these companies SPACing right now, you look at all of the VC money going to media and to sports, you look at startups, either startup leagues like the PLL, or you look at startup organization like Together or Athletes Unlimited. It's very obvious that there's a lot of energy being put into 2 things. 1 is emerging sports, 2 is women's sports, and 3 is nascent and digital first media companies. I think that sounds like a great idea. What I will also say from where I sit at Barstool Sports, it's fucking hard to break through. You know, one of the things that happened when Together launched, and I'm a huge fan of what Together is trying to do, but they clearly spent a lot of money sending care packages to influencers. Like, that's not scalable. That's not what's going to make your brand stand out or break through. When I look at the women's sports space, I look at The Gist, I look at Together. Like, I could probably name 5 or 6 brands that are all competing on Instagram to be the ESPN of women's sports. It's hard to break through. You can look at sports leagues, you look at the PLL, you look at the NLL, you look at all of the boxing organizations that are being started. You look at all of the emerging sports, darts, bowling, softball, surfing, volleyball. Like, there's all these sports that were always very interesting to people who played sports. And there's a whole bunch of energy and a whole bunch of investments trying to make these sports appeal to a far broader and more mass audience. So when I think about it, though, breaking through in entertainment, so as a personality, and breaking through as a league or a sport, really at the end of the day isn't all that different. So if you think about breaking through in sports, what do you need? You need great athletes, right? You've got to have the single best players. Paul talked about this. This is the whole debate in women's hockey between the PWHPA and the NWHL. The PWHPA people say, hey, if you don't have the best players, you're not going to have the best league, you're not going to have the best sport. I tend to agree with that. The second thing you need is operations, right? When you look again at women's hockey, which is just the emerging sport that I've been personally most interested in besides the PLL. When you look at, operations matter, right? You need to be able to run a schedule. You need to be able to handle remote operations. One of the things that was so painful about the NWHL bubble is 1, the league was underfunded, and 2, the operations were deficient. Everyone got COVID. They were sharing trainers. Trainers were passing COVID from team to team to team to team. They weren't quarantined the way they needed to. And it wasn't because they weren't smart, and it wasn't because they didn't have the right intention. The reality is they were trying to cut corners to make things work within a budget. And when you don't have a budget, it's hard to run a strong operation. This is a lesson we've learned the hard way at Barstool like 1,000 times over. We're having a discussion right now. I'm actually very excited about it, about what Barstool could do in women's hockey. Had a meeting. We've had like 3 meetings on it this week. I think it could be epic, but the reality is we can't be cheap. Like, we have to invest in the operation to make it a great experience. First and foremost for the players, but second, and really importantly, we have to make it great for the fans. Speaking of, what's the third thing you need to have a great sports league is fans, obviously. Your fans are who pay you, right? The advertisers want the fans. They'll pay you as well. But your fans, if you don't get your fans engaged, you don't get your fans coming to see every game, you don't get your fans talking about you, you don't have your fans acting like Frankie Borelli crying the other night at the Islanders game in the same like goddamn sweater he's worn every single game, which is obviously for luck, your sport isn't going to work. So, what I loved about the Busing with the Boys guys is and we talked about this with Will, is how he thinks about the Busing with the Boys fans and how Taylor really categorizes them. Tier 1, fucking hardos, right? Like, you need to have fucking hardos to make your sport work. You need the people who are wearing your merch. You need the people who believe in the superstitions. You need the people who are obsessing about the ins and outs and the rights and lefts and everything and anything happening in the sport. You also need tier 2 and tier 3 fans, as the Busing guys would say. You need people who follow the league. You need people who, if given the chance of what to do on a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon, will go to a game. You need people who identify as rooting for the team or the sport. And then the last thing you need to drive ticket sales and to drive interest and ultimately to drive tune in for broadcast, no matter where that is, you need to be able to have people who are aware. I think the biggest issues for emerging sports right now is that you don't have the hardos, you don't have the tier 2s, and you can't break through to get enough awareness to make a broadcaster take a bet on you, or to have an advertiser want to give you hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to promote and grow your product. Speaking of that, you obviously need distribution, right? So distribution, having more people touch your product, is the best way to get more tier 2s or to get more fucking hardos. Right? If you can't have people become aware of you, there is no chance that they will become a fan of you. So distribution is obviously changing a great deal. There's digital distribution, there's social distribution, there's broadcast distribution, there's cable distribution. But distribution is important. This is something the PLL has done, I think, an incredible job of. Their deal with NBC is so strong. The way they changed their game to be more attractive on broadcast, the way they have thought about their rights deals, that really matters. You can look at the same thing in the boxing space, right? Where, you see Jake Paul. Jake Paul is a personality. He has fans. He has his own band of fucking hardos. He started out on Triller. Now he's going to go to Showtime, right? So he's thinking about distribution. The distribution matters to not only get people to pay attention to you, the distribution validates you, right? When we were trying to legitimize Barstool, the first place I put us was on Sirius. The second place I put us was on a television network. We went on Comedy Central. It was important to get more fans to Barstool. But what I would really argue is, of all the people that watched our Comedy Central show or all the people that tuned into Barstool Radio, most of them were from Barstool. But both partnerships legitimized us. And legitimization is also something that is important in growing a nascent or developing sport. And then finally, need to be able to make money, right? Every GM knows this. You need to manage your ticket sales. You need to be able to own your rights and to be able to command the highest dollar for them. You've got to have great merchandise. You have to have merchandise that's accessible. One of my biggest criticisms of the PLL is it is impossible to get merch on site. And that's hard because that's cost, that's logistics, that's operations. That's why all these things tie together. It's also a great sign because it shows that they're selling out every single place that they go. And then finally, you obviously want the advertisers, right? Advertisers, advertising is, what is it? The grease that skids the wheel. Do you know what I mean? Advertising is the grease that spins the wheel. I don't really know what that analogy is, but advertising makes the world go round, right? It's high margin revenue. It's great strategic alignment. Gatorade is aligned with the PLL. Vineyard Vines is aligned with the PLL. That enables the PLL to run their operation and to make sure they are as close to profitable as possible, or they're running at the least amount of loss possible. It's also great for those brands to reach new target consumers. Entertainment, switching gears, isn't really that different. Instead of athletes, you have personalities, right? In the case of boxing, you have Jake Paul, who serves as both. You look at what Paul Rabil is doing, he's serving as both. I thought one of the most fascinating things was that Paul describes the PLL as being in the entertainment business. And I think that's one of the biggest shifts in sports, is that to succeed, sport has to think about itself as entertainment. I think boxing is on the cutting edge of this. I think the UFC has done a great job of this with personalities like Conor McGregor. I think we're blurring the lines of what's sports and comedy and entertainment, but you have to be entertaining to get people to pay attention to you. The second thing you need, obviously when you're an athlete, and Will talked about this, you need to train, right? You need to be able to dedicate yourself to your physical fitness, your physical well-being, and your athletic prowess. The same is true on the internet. The same is true as a personality. You have to be consistent. You have to go through the reps. You have to practice every day. You have to be completely maniacally dedicated to publishing content in the same way an athlete is completely and maniacally committed to making plays or practicing shots or making tackles, right? It's the same exact behavior. One is just in content and the other is just on the field. Same exact structure in terms of needing fans, right? You need to be able to have your fucking hardos. You need your tier 2s. You need your tier 3s. The more fans that you can attract, the bigger the brand you can be. Dave Portnoy is a genius at this. He does pizza reviews. I know so many people who watch every pizza review, who've downloaded the app, who wear the t-shirts, who are going to buy the products when we make them. Then you have people of like, oh, there's the pizza guy. So then you have the people who just follow Dave on Instagram, millions of them, who are watching pizza reviews when they pop up on the feed. And then you have the people who are like, oh yeah, Dave Portnoy, he's the pizza guy. It's the same thing in sports. It's the same thing in entertainment. You have to have fans, and you have to have different types of fans and a way to grow fans to become more and more hardos as time goes on. Obviously, you want to have core, hardcore fans. If every personality or athlete or league or team could be so lucky, your stadium, your screening room, your followers are all filled with hardos, right? Everybody knows that's not possible. That's just not how the world works. You are better off as a business the more hardos you have, right? When you look at what we're doing with the Barstool Sports book, we know we're tapping into people who are aware of Barstool Sports. We know we're tapping into people who are loyal to our brand. That's exactly what we want to do. We need to give them a reason to bet with us, right? We need to give them a reason to be a hardo. And I think part of the reason to be a hardo is, what are you giving your fan that makes them feel a sense of loyalty to you, a sense of affinity with you, and a desire to be an authority on you, right? It's the same thing we tell our personalities, right? Jared is synonymous with what's happening with the Red Sox. He's a Red Sox hardo, but as a result, he's building his own hardo followers because he's showing what's happening with the Red Sox. He never misses a beat. And so one of the things that I think is changing in marketing is you used to just hit people with direct mail or email or text messages or banner ads or whatever it may be. Frequency would be the surest path to convert you from a tier 3 to a tier 2 to a tier 1. Now it's different. Now you need to use the content itself. You need to use the drama that surrounds your product. You need to use those things. You need to use press. You need to use earned media to drive people from being a 3 to a 2 to a 1. So speaking of drama, right, Paul and I touched on this. So Matt Gaudette, he was a guest on the podcast last summer. I liked Matt Gaudette. He's like this mouthy Canadian. He was like running his mouth on the field. Clearly, he's badly behaved off the field. He had his finger bitten off in an altercation with another player. Now, what was interesting, and Paul was obviously quite demure about it, is what was the league going to do about bad behavior happening off the field? Personally, I think it's a great thing. It's not great for the brand. It's probably tarnishes the reputation. The Vineyard Vines people are like, really? Are these guys like drunk and biting each other in the lobby? Like, not a great look. But it's interesting. It's different. That type of storyline, that type of drama is what makes people invested. And it doesn't always have to be that extreme. Matt and the other player were fired from the PLL. They were terminated. But I guarantee a lot of heads turned because of the drama because of the way it unfolded and because of what happened. And hopefully those people will be interested in the PLL. They'll stick around to watch the PLL. Maybe they'll root for a player on the PLL, or they'll root for Matt's team. That's a good example of how do you, don't waste a good crisis. How do you take anything and everything happening around your brand, your team, your sports, and your player, and how do you use that to convert people to pay attention to you? Distribution, same deal. The great thing about the internet, the great thing about social media is that you can control your distribution. That's been harder in sports than it has been in entertainment. And then finally is monetization. How are you thinking about direct-to-consumer monetization? How do you involve advertisers? How do you think about licensing? How do you monetize live events? Are you doing ticket sales? And so what I think is really interesting is really essentially how these two spheres are becoming extremely similar, and how the distribution points are changing and the access points are enabling athletes to become entertainers and entertainers to become athletes. And that's what I think is so disruptive about the time and space that we're in. Dixie D'Amelio, we talked to Mark D'Amelio last week. Dixie D'Amelio is a BMX biker. There's no reason that Dixie couldn't put BMX biking on the planet. Haley Deegan is a NASCAR driver. She's also adorable and very funny and very outspoken. There's no reason that these women or these people in general can create the ultimate crossover. If you can create that crossover, build fans, find distribution, generate awareness, and have a good strategy for monetization, that's how you can break through. What's interesting about both Paul and Will is they're athletes, they're entrepreneurs, and they're podcasters. Ad Results Media is one of our biggest and best partners in podcasting. What Ad Results does is they match creators and brands. They do so by understanding content. They do so by understanding market fit. I read an article this morning which was talking about, the heyday and the boom of the content creator, right? Everybody's talking about Alex Cooper. There's another podcast that's for sale for $20 million. What Ad Results understands incredibly well is how to create one-to-one connections at scale. So they understand the relationship between a listener and the host. They understand exactly what we were just talking about with the idea of hardcore, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 fans. And they understand how to make those fans convert for the brand, not just for the host and the content of the podcast. If you go to adresultsmedia.com/token, you can find out more about advertising your product or your brand via Ad Results Media. They enable you to be part of the story. So just recapping this episode, the biggest things that I loved from these conversations are, one, I love to be around people who are in the middle of trying to make something work and aren't exactly sure how to do so. I feel like that every single day. I think that that's what makes your life so interesting, is if you can surround yourself with people who are also on their own journeys, also trying to figure something out, and who also have great ambition and desire to achieve something and the work ethic to try to make it happen. I think those two things are resoundingly true of Paul Rabil and Will Compton. I also love the idea of compartmentalizing, right? Paul has to compartmentalize being a great athlete and a midfielder for the Cannons and the founder and executive of the PLL. Will Compton has to do the same thing. He has to compartmentalize his regular life because he doesn't know where he's going to be, who he's going to play for, and when he has to go. He compartmentalizes his podcast life, and he compartmentalizes his playing life. So one of the things that I don't actually think people spend enough time talking about is how do you move across that 4 box? How do you move things from having a belief to understanding your potential to putting in the work and driving results? But also, how do you compartmentalize who you are, what you do, and where you do it every single day to be able to make those 4 things possible? So those are my 2 biggest takeaways from the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. You can leave us a voicemail at 440-462-1729. You can leave us questions. You can tell us a topic that you want us to focus on. You can watch this podcast on YouTube. You can follow us on LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. I'm at EKA Nardini, and Token CEO is at Token CEO. And then finally, you can join our Facebook group. It's an awesome collection of people. They talk about careers. They talk about mentorship. They talk about issues in the workplace. They talk about adulting. There's really not much that group doesn't talk about. So we'll see you back here on Thursday.
it.